I'll still explore a few times a year in a ceremonial context, but I feel like those early formative years where we were really exploring really changed so much in our consciousness. Mm-hmm. And look, we've both ended up in these fields of wellness and mm-hmm. helping people. And I think the psychedelics really opened our minds to what's possible with how powerful the mind is mm-hmm. in creating our reality.
Welcome back, my friends. What happens when two childhood friends reunite in a sauna to talk about music, medicine, and meaning? In this sauna session recorded at aro-ha, I sit down with sonic visionary Amani Friend. He's the artist behind Liquid Bloom and co-founder of Desert Dwellers. We trace the arc of Amani's musical journey from banging on marimbas as a toddler in Santa Fe to composing soundscapes for psychedelic therapy and breathwork. Along the way, we explore the power of sound to shift consciousness, the role of intention in cultural collaboration, and how early experiences with psychedelics shaped our paths in wellness and creativity. This is a warm, wide-ranging conversation between old friends. Yeah, it was a real treat for me personally. And it's also an invitation for us to listen more deeply to the world within and around. If these conversations are valuable to you, it would truly mean the world to me if you would take a moment just to subscribe here. I know we get a lot of these requests, but it really allows us to know that you value us and helps to keep the fire burning. So appreciate that. And I think it's time. Let's dive into the sauna with Amani Friend. Enjoy. Amani, here we are, man. Welcome to the Sauna Sessions.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, a real pleasure. I just want to kind of acknowledge, first of all, that we've known each other since we were 8. So it's like sitting with my best friend in this place. And I know a lot, but what I've noticed in this visit and getting to drop in with you is that there's so much I don't know. Like, it's so crazy how many stories can exist in someone's life that you've known forever, and yet you really don't know the wholeness of it. So I thought I might start by asking a little bit about the earliest memories you have in relationship to music. Maybe just sharing one or two moments where either there was like the poignant hardship or the hook. Where did Liquid Bloom start? Where did Desert Dwellers start?
Well, first of all, it's really great to be here and see you again. Mm-hmm. And no matter how many years go by, we never skip a beat. And it feels amazing to be in your presence, and what you've created here is just so beautiful. So thanks for bringing me down. We had such a beautiful event here, and it was really special. So super grateful to be here and see you again and catch up and share stories. Yeah, so my dad was a musician, as you remember, and he loved collecting musical instruments and all sorts of other things as well. But so my earliest memory was the age of your daughter, just banging on instruments in the house. You know, he had everything you could imagine. I think one of my favorites was his marimba collection. And there's photos of me as a baby just banging on his marimbas. So yeah, I was just always around sound and music from an early age. And they put me through some piano lessons when I was 4. That started, and that eventually led to these like ensembles for youth, like when I was a teenager, and even earlier. I think I started when I was 8 or 9 with this amazing musician, Kevin Zernig in Santa Fe.
And that was playing piano.
Yeah. And then eventually my dad bought me a workstation that had a bunch of sounds on it so I could play music in these ensembles. But the workstation also had a sequencer on it. And this was early. It was like 88. And I really liked that little sequencer. I used to start, putting my own songs together and programming Bob Marley songs and all sorts of things. I really got into the programming part, and in 94, I got a computer that could make music, and went to Kevin's college program in Santa Fe.
So that sequencer is kind of like early digital music making, where you were kind of, is that already starting to record sounds and then kind of trigger them as like samples?
Yeah, this particular workstation already had its own sounds in it. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like a sampler, so you can put your own sounds in it, but it had a whole huge bank of sounds. And then you're basically like sequencing those sounds into little sections, and then you could like flow between the sections, like verse, chorus, bridge, so it's different patterns that you could program. So yeah, it's early programming. Yeah.
I remember you were the one that got me into reggae music, and we listened to a lot of reggae music when we were young. And then you've ended up in and it was there really early. I think I remember your first cassette tape that you put out, and I still can kind of visualize the cover. I think it may have not been the first, but quite close to it. And your music already had this very unique sound, but it wasn't at all reggae. So where was that coming from? Do you have a sense of how that came about?
Well, I was really into world music. Yeah. And that came a lot from early travels, because my parents would travel to South America a lot. And you and I went on a trip when we were 8 to Central America with my parents. And so, yeah, I was very influenced by what I heard as a young kid, all these different world music influences. We also went to Jamaica as a family, so I think that's where the reggae came from. But beyond reggae, I was really into like East Indian music and the didgeridoo. I started playing the didgeridoo, and so yeah, that gave the music I was making a really unique sound. A world sound, worldly sound mixed with the electronica at a very early age.
And what is the genre like today when you kind of put your music into genres? Where does that sit?
All over the place, anywhere from ambient to house and down tempo and bass music. It kind of fits a lot of different genres. Depending on the sound. But yeah, it's usually a combination of world music and electronica mixed together.
It's got a certain sound, and then it can have, it's like the energy comes from maybe the bass lines and the kind of like the genre, doesn't it? Because it can either be all the way ambient and meditative and incredible for ceremony. And, I pretty much guarantee anybody listening, if you've been to many yoga classes or many kind of conscious spaces at all, you've heard a lot of Amani's music, just to put this into context. And it can be high energy, full ecstatic dance,
totally.
Peaky. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love all of it, and I love being able to tailor music to specific things like psychedelic therapy or ecstatic dance. They're very different genres, obviously, and both are very powerful and potent ways of delivering an experience and a journey for people that's meaningful.
When was the first time you saw that kind of like, do you remember maybe first being on stage where you were like, whoa, like what I've done here just shifted this crowd? Because of course now it's probably, maybe it's just like every day for you that you're, creating these transformative experiences for people. And we did just have an event here, and it was, I would say it was the most powerful event we've had, as a single day, like a half day festival. And the sequence of it was really powerful. And I think people were, impacted deeply. I know it, like for me, it's almost like dead sober, but almost feeling like you're on, the most high frequency thing that you can be on. And so when was that? Was that already there in the early days?
No, I don't think the performance part was there till much later. I did do some performing in the 90s at some raves. I approached it differently in the late 90s. I would like bring all my studio gear and set it up, what was called a live PA, versus just DJing, which was a lot easier. So that didn't last too long because it was just so much work and bringing everything. So I ended up switching gears and pivoting more to like graphic design and web design, and then working on music in the studio. And I stopped really like focusing on events and throwing events in the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. But I was still making music, and I started making music for yoga DVDs, actually, like scoring the music that would go underneath the yoga teacher's guidance. And we did like probably like 30 DVDs. So there was quite a lot of music that came out of that wow. we then put out as Desert Dwellers. Mm-hmm. And then later I started getting back into performing around 2009, 2010. Just little things in Santa Fe called Dream Temple. And then around 2012 is when things really shifted. And I went on sabbatical with my graphic design job and actually never went back.
Wow.
And the first memorable experiences were later in 2012. As Desert Dwellers, we went to Australia to play at the Eclipse Festival in North Queensland. Mm-hmm. And that was really epic. And then also we went to Egypt for December 21st, 2012, and played in front of the Great Pyramids. Wow. And we did a little Europe tour. But those two, the Australia and the Egypt shows, were really, really potent and fun.
It must be cool to kind of go from you're in New Mexico, where people know you and there's relationship and all that, to go international and realize that people are listening to your music, across oceans and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. We put out a lot of music and it spread out throughout the world. And also Liquid Bloom, I put out some CDs that were more like medicine music, and those also, that album Heart of the Shamans and Face of Love and Shaman's Eye, those early albums also spread just through word of mouth. People were using them in their ceremonies and meditation practices. And so, yeah, it was time to go out and start performing and creating experiences.
Yeah. You and I did quite a bit of exploration around psychedelics and just, I guess, exploring that realm together when we were little. And it seems like it's really come full circle now and is really in the zeitgeist. And obviously you're quite connected to that, and you're seeing where psychedelic-assisted therapy is going, and you're writing music for those sorts of experiences. What's your relationship now to psychedelics? And what happens when somebody comes to you and they're like, hey, I'm interested in this, or I never tried this, or, what sort of guidance do you give to people?
Honestly, I don't actually do a lot of psychedelics anymore. For me, like breath work and hot cold therapy and these sort of things feel much more embodying. And I'll still explore a few times a year in a ceremonial context, but I feel like those early formative years where we were really exploring really changed so much in our consciousness. Mm-hmm. And look, we've both ended up in these fields of wellness and helping people. And I think the psychedelics really opened our minds to what's possible with how powerful the mind is in creating our reality. Mm-hmm. But I think it was Ram Dass who said, once you get the message, hang up the phone or something, so at a certain point, it just, unless it's like your mission to offer ceremony and constantly be doing these medicines, then it kind of becomes a distraction to keep doing them over and over again.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I've come to the same place. Actually, I very, very rarely do anything anymore. Really quite sober. And I see the value. For me, it ended up being valuable overall.
Absolutely. I think it's so important to one's journey.
Yeah.
Because, you have these like peak experiences that it's very hard to get to with any other way than, these medicines.
Yeah.
It can really change a lot very quickly.
Yeah.
Change people's patterns and how they're thinking, and create a whole new network of neurogenesis in their minds,
Yeah.
But you need to go back to your question. Like, I feel like people really need to have the right container and setting and the right integration and the right people to help you decipher what you went through,
Yeah.
which is actually something we didn't have.
We didn't have that. Yeah, I was just reflecting on that. I'm like, we did not have that. We were kind of like cowboys and just like a bit reckless, I would say.
Yeah, totally. And I never imagined that it would be so accepted now, you know?
Yeah.
Back then, like we were rebels.
Yeah. But it does, you know, for anyone listening, like, first of all, I know Amani and I both have friends where psychedelics haven't necessarily been helpful and have been quite damaging. So I think it is a medicine, all, you know, just the entire mix of opportunities out there around psychedelics are really to be respected and to be taken with intention and with support and when you feel called, because I don't think it's for everyone, eh?
Yeah.
But they have been really powerful for me. And your music has been really powerful for me. I was telling you a story recently that my mother and I were in ceremony, and, you know, one of your tracks came on, and you've recorded your mother in some of your music. And so I got to hear, you know, the voice of Bente coming into my ceremony, and it was like brought tears to my eyes and was such a beautiful connection. What's been Mom's role in music for you?
Yeah, as you call her, Mom too.
Mm-hmm.
We're basically like brothers because we grew up together in Santa Fe, and and Bente was musically, like, I actually created the first liquid blue music for her healing practice. Mm-hmm. She was a shamanic therapist and would help people reprogram their own beliefs, kind of like Joe Dispenza. And she was following that work early on, and part of her practice was needing this kind of shamanic music to hold the space of healing for her clients. So the first album, Shaman's Eye, was actually, I didn't think I was going to release it as an album into the world. It was more for her practice. So she really influenced that album. And when we were putting out the yoga music with White Swan Music, I played this album I was working on with my mom called Shaman's Eye to Parmita, who runs White Swan Records, and she loved it. And she was like, we got to put this out. And so we did. And that led to other releases with Liquid Bloom. And so, yeah, I consider my relationship with Bente like really the genesis of that project. Yeah.
If you were to kind of, you mentioned Joe Dispenza, would that work be kind of underneath the same sort of umbrella of the sort of sound and the sort of, I guess, genre that you were doing with yoga teachers, or was that quite different?
No, that was very different. It was more, a bed of music to be played underneath their instructions for yoga on the DVD. Mm-hmm. So it was a fusion of East Indian music with modern beats and, like kind of Debbie bass lines and down-tempo beats.
Mm-hmm. And with Joe,
with Joe, he actually licensed music for 2 of his breathwork albums called Inspired Volume 1 and 2. Yeah, he picked similar sounding tracks, but a little more up-tempo, kind of more like 4/4 house beats, more energetic for his style of breathwork. Yeah.
Cool. Are there any projects or collaborations that are on the horizon there that are interesting you're looking forward to?
I'm working with a musician called Hanax Pacha, and we have 2 tracks coming out this year that's been really fun to work on. I just finished a really long series of music with my dear brother Parangi, and those are called the Sauna Sessions. We worked on those over the pandemic for a clinic in Austin called Kuya. And they were designed for psychedelic therapy, specifically for ketamine, which is, very accepted and legal in the States. And so, yeah, those albums are all out now. And we've also remixed all of them into ecstatic dance tracks as well with a whole range of producers. So that whole project's finally complete. And so, yeah, now I'm in a place of like inquiry of what's next creatively. I do want to work on some more kind of Buddhist mantra music.
Is there a particular sound to something like ketamine? Like if you know, because that's quite specific. It's like, oh, we're writing this for ketamine assisted therapy. Do you do ketamine in order to get what the music needs to sound like, or how does that work?
We did need to research the space and do a bit, because I was never really into ketamine as a party drug. It felt kind of like dissociative.
Yeah.
When really you want to be dancing and more embodied instead of like floating off in space. So yeah, when we got asked to make the music, we did do some intermuscular ketamine just to see what the space was like and also what the timing was like. And then we took that into the studio and, you know, followed that timing, which is basically we would make 3 tracks. Dr. Dan is who we were working with at Kuya, and he wanted each hour to really be a hero's journey where you're like preparing for the journey, then you're in a liminal space, and then you come back home and integrate within that hour. So we broke that into 3 tracks, and the first track is 15 minutes, and that's like where the medicine's coming on and you're starting to feel it and feeling like you're about to enter this journey space and getting on the path. And then you go into 25 minutes of like liminal deep space. And that's where you're really feeling the medicine and doing the work, and things might come up. So sometimes that section intentionally invokes a space of bringing things to the surface. So it might be more in a minor scale or a little bit invoking, not so like major and happy. And then the last section is 20 minutes. We would design that in a major scale. You're like coming back home to your heart. It's more uplifting. So it intentionally has this journey to it. It's not just the flat, you know, hour of new age major music. It's like it has a story and a journey to it. And that was by design. Dan was like really specifically wanting that.
Have you always known, for example, I mean, major, minor, and like you're kind of hinting at the fact that the sound or the key of the music or the frequency of the music is affecting how we feel or what we receive or potentially our mood or what comes up? Has that been something that you've been working with for long, or is that just does that come with music? Yeah,
that's something you learn, that these different scales invoke different emotions. Yeah.
Wow, cool. Have you ever done anything with like binaural beats? Or because I know we've worked a little bit with, we had this little device called a Muse, which was basically an EEG. So you'd put the band over your head and it would give you your brainwave frequency or the state of consciousness, and we could watch, and then we would do different things with it. So we would use, flickering light, for example, with the Lucia, and we would watch, how that might affect somebody's state of consciousness, alpha, beta, theta, gamma, etc. Have you guys ever done anything where you're intentionally working with that sort of frequency?
Yeah, we haven't done specific binaural beat infused music, but the early liquid blue music was designed with a repetitive beat that shamans would also use this repetitive beat to induce theta brainwaves. So that was kind of my my idea with my mom's music, was to create this repetitive beat that would help people drop into theta brain waves for her work. And I have had people hook up their patients to EEGs while listening to my music, and I've seen the results of that and how it creates coherence in the brain.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, amazing. Were there particular albums that were studied?
Yeah, they were working with the recent Kuya music that I did with Parangi.
Yeah. Wow, cool. Does that feel like a space that's continuing to open up with psychedelic-assisted music?
Absolutely. I feel like psilocybin is next.
Yeah.
In terms of being accepted as a healing tool, and MDMA as well. MAPS has been working towards that for a while. So yeah, I feel like this is kind of the third wave of the psychedelic revolution. Our parents in the 60s was the first, and then we were the second in the 90s. And now it's like it's come back around, and this third wave, and this is a little more accepted as a healing kind of clinical thing.
Yeah, it seems really unique. It's almost like in the 60s, things were legal because nobody knew what they were,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then when we were doing it, it was all illegal.
Right.
And now Australia, for example, has legalized the use of MDMA and psilocybin for particular, you know, guided experiences and therapeutic uses. And I know New Zealand has legalized the use of cannabis, you know, with a prescription. I never thought I'd see the day, to be honest.
Yeah,
I'm
neither.
totally surprised and shocked. And past the point where I really care that much because I'm not planning to use any of it, but it's still very cool. And I think there's great value in it. And I think, you know, for those that need it, you know, one of these experiences, especially when paired with beautiful, powerful music. I mean, I can only imagine, you know, laying down on a couch and putting a pair of headphones on and putting on one of your albums and going for a journey. It would just be really super powerful. So it's nice to see the world being open, but also kind of, I think we are creating a more intentional relationship with these powerful substances. So it seems like we're going the right direction.
Yeah. And that's really one of the reasons that interested Parangi and I to create this music, is because whether, you know, it's happening, right? It's happening. So we wanted to create some beautiful content for people to really have a deeper experience. Our intention was to bring a lot of organic sounds into the music, because that, to us, that balanced out the kind of more chemical feeling of ketamine, create a more organic space and an organic journey with the energy and what you're experiencing. Because when we were testing it out, like, we would do it with just, you know, pads and more electronic sounds, and it was a very different experience than when you hear nature and a didgeridoo or, you know, some vocals, and that changes the experience a lot. So yeah, we were really wanting to create content for people's experience and make it even more powerful. And that's actually something I've always wanted to do, is create music that is for a specific purpose, like the yoga music or the music for my mom, or, you know, the psychedelic therapy is like, it's being utilized for a specific journey and well-being. You know, it's like, I realized we're both in the wellness field in our own ways, you know.
Do you have a sense of why? I know you've worked a lot with nature. I remember, you know, there were years where I pretty much never saw you without like a field recorder, and you would kind of just travel. And I think you might even have one now. And you just kind of pick up sounds from nature as you go along. So there's that. But then there's also kind of recording voices and teachers and people from other cultures and shamans and, you know, things of that sort. And then there's also kind of picking up sounds from different cultures and different musical backgrounds. Do you have a sense of why certain sounds, like just take maybe the music, especially kind of like the Latin sounding or like Andean sounding music, like why does that seem to evoke a more ceremonial space? Is that just because it's not necessarily our culture as, say, Americans? Like it's not a sound that necessarily, you know, comes out of Detroit or something like that.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, but yeah, the first thing is I have used a recorder for like 25 years. Yeah. And over the pandemic, I ended up packaging all my recordings into a sample pack that people can download and utilize in their music. But yeah, it's always been this hobby of mine just to record what I'm hearing while I travel around. I think I started in like 2000. Yeah.
Do you ever get, I'm often interested because I teach yoga, for example, and yoga is not from my culture. It comes from India. And, you know, there are so many spaces where we kind of are teaching. You mentioned Buddhism and wanting to work with Buddhist mantra or maybe throat singing or different sounds. And, you know, I teach meditation and that's coming from Buddhism. And as you travel and as you kind of share these kind of world music sounds, how do you find you're welcomed? Is there ever any sense of like cultural appropriation or people not welcoming you working with their music or their sounds? Or like, how does that land for people internationally?
Internationally, I think people really love the world music. It's kind of had its phases in the United States. It comes and goes. But I feel like the Liquid Bloom Project and Desert Dwellers is really popular around the world because of all the world music. I've never been called out for cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
I tend to try to work with the authentic lineages. Even back in the 90s, I was working with, you remember Yamuna and her whole family, and they were just super steeped in East Indian tradition and culture. And I'm always trying to find like the authentic source of that and collaborate. So it's cultural collaboration, really. I've put out projects where all the profits and proceeds go to supporting a tribe in the Amazon. And, I'm not trying to like make money off of somebody's art. We're always like making sure everyone gets their proper percentages and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's more of a collaboration. I feel like the world sees that authenticity and appreciates it.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, like with aro-ha, of course, is a Maori word and has a deep meaning of connecting with breath and divinity. And what I've found is even if somebody initially is maybe skeptical or there's some apprehension, that as soon as we get to have a chat or they get to understand what our intention is, that everything feels collaborative and it feels like we're on the same side and that we're really just looking to uplift. I would agree. I feel like just in general with that whole topic, it's like, what is your intention?
Yeah, it comes down to intention.
Yeah,
sure.
If it's clear, then it's clear. If you could fast forward and create something in the next couple of years, have there been any kind of out of the box ideas or things you're looking to call in?
I think right now I'm just in a like open phase of asking, what the next thing is for me, because I just completed this big project for psychedelic therapy, and I've been putting more energy into liquid bloom, and I'm on a world tour right now that I'm finishing up here in New Zealand, and I went to Mexico and Peru and a lot in Australia, and exploring more this year, this container of breathwork and dance together in one experience, often with cacao at the beginning. That feels really supportive of the Liquid Bloom project, because I'm able to play all the different aspects of the project from ambient to dance. So I definitely want to continue exploring that more. And I've been very into Tibetan Buddhism for most of my life. And I've done a few tracks that bring in mantras, but I'd like to explore that more. Yeah, cool. Do some more mantra work.
That'd be an amazing sound.
Yeah.
And if people want to listen more, where are the best places to find you?
The most supportive platform is called Bandcamp, where people can buy music and support the artist more, because we all get a higher percentage of the sales. But my music's everywhere. Spotify. I put some longer sets on YouTube with some cool visuals. There's one set on there that's almost 5 hours. That's for ceremony space or psychedelic therapy or
with video kind of visual.
And it has visuals and video. Cool. Yeah. So that's all on the Liquid Bloom channel.
And particular albums, if somebody's connecting with that psychedelic space, you mentioned the Kuya project. Is that public?
Yep. The Kuya Sessions, there's 4 of them, and they're all on Bandcamp and everywhere else. Yeah. Okay. Those are the best ones for psychedelic therapy. There's also a Desert Dwellers album called Breath, Portal to Stillness. That's really nice for that space. Or you can go back further in the catalog and listen to, Heart of the Shamans and Face of Love and Shaman's Eye, which were all designed for that space as well.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Super cool, brother. So good to sweat with you in the sauna.
It's coming
feeling the drips coming down the face.
It's coming.
Just so appreciate taking a moment with you, man.
Yeah.
Love you so much.
Love you so much. Thanks for having me.
No worries.
All right.
I so appreciate Amani for showing up with such a grounded presence. And to you, the listener, thank you for joining us in this warm conversation. If you'd like to see more or find some links, you can head over to the show notes and the home of the Adventures in Wellbeing podcast, which is at aro-ha.com. And we look forward to seeing you again next time. Lots of love.